Happy New Year!
Whoa. We already did that. Are you like Frosty the Snowman? It's like, happy birthday, no matter what day of the year it is.
No, it's a new year, though. It's another new year, Father Harrison.
Why is it another new year?
It's the year of Saint Joseph.
Doesn't the phrase New Year loses its meaning when you use it for everything?
No, I think there's multiple overlapping years going on at one point in time.
Okay.
It's like
So
it's
in
a
other
layer
words,
cake of years.
okay. So what I'm hearing is that it's the year of the Italians.
It's most certainly the year of Italians. The funny is, I'm not sure how many people know this. I've got to do a better job about preaching about it. But yeah, the Holy Father was like, this year of St. Joseph. It's the 150th anniversary of St. Joseph being declared the patron of the church, right? I think that's why he did it.
Something like that.
And
I
if,
couldn't remember what it was.
yeah, I think that's the reason. So just get your St. Joseph devotions going and,
Yeah.
and getting up and start praying
Yeah.
some litanies and stuff because the year of St.
That's
Joseph,
right.
which is great because, my goodness, what the world and the church really needs is a understanding of masculinity and fatherhood and
Mm-hmm.
complementarity and silence and action that follows prayer, and all that is very good to me.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something else I really want to talk about. So you're St. Joseph,
Okay.
Happy New Year. But
Yes.
I wanted to talk about a podcast that's not
Okay.
ours.
Oh.
And normally I don't like plugging other people's podcasts, but this one's really good. Father Harrison, have you listened to the Daughters Project yet?
I haven't. I want to. I mean, I keep on meaning to. I keep on meaning to get onto it. Because I love those sisters. They're great friends, and I keep on forgetting to go onto Patreon to sign up.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the Daughters. I mean, it's on. It's on. You can use your regular old streaming devices.
I know, but I want to also support them.
Yeah. So the Daughters of St. Paul started their own podcast, and it's
That's right.
wonderful. It's very high quality. It's much better than our podcast. So just stop listening to us. Start listening to the Daughters Project.
Well, no. But here's the thing: these things aren't in competition with each other.
Yes, they are.
You just talked about complementarity.
I did. I did talk about complementarity.
It's now by listening to them and then listening to us. It's like breathing the two lungs of the church.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah. But like, it's kind of like Pope Francis trying to breathe with two lungs. Like one is just better than the other for Pope Francis. There, one is healthy and vibrant, and the
other one is
like,
not existent and dead.
No, but seriously, they have three sisters on there. They are wonderful. The quality is very good, just like the audio quality. I was like, wow, listen to this. This is really good, and it's refreshingly down to earth and spiritual. It's very real. And it's just really nice. I really like it. It's very pleasant and edifying to my soul. What's that?
How long are the episodes?
Oh, podcast length?
Yeah.
What are they? Not quite as long as ours, but
okay. Like half hour, 45 minutes?
Yeah, I think 45 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, no, I keep on meaning to check it out. I am a horrible friend who keeps on forgetting to hit download.
Yeah, but I've reached a point where I am listening to too many podcasts. I just found Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, and he'll like put out a couple times a year like 5-hour long podcasts. So I listened to like 20 hours on the Pacific theater of World War II, and now I'm learning about the Persians and King Cyrus and Darius and wars against the what are they called, Greek people and stuff. Delightful.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah,
that's what I've been doing.
I got a good handful of podcasts I listen to. I've actually been wanting to increase it a bit anyways, but I've been listening actually to an audiobook lately a lot. So on evolutionary biology. So that's been kind of taking up a lot of my listening time. It's actually quite interesting. It's trying to argue that what makes us unique beings in the evolutionary process is the fact that we are cultural creatures, that it's our cultural learning, our social learning, and our social skills, our ability to relate to another, that we are primarily social by nature. That's what gives us the edge over the other species. and it's really quite interesting and fascinating. So that's been taking up a lot of my time. So I've been a little behind on my podcasts, and I feel bad and like a horrible friend. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, there you go.
Wait, let's be honest.
What?
What would life be if I wasn't feeling guilty with regards to religious sisters?
That's true. It's
Right?
very, it's very, very Catholic of you.
Exactly.
Okay, well, speaking of podcasts, you're listening to one right now. Welcome to Clerically Speaking. I'm Father Anthony.
I'm Father Harrison, and I am kind of happy to sit down for a bit. I mean, I had a small funeral service this afternoon, but the majority of my day today has been I'm sending out and signing personally and addressing personally, at least in the card, 750 Christmas cards right now. That's a lot of Christmas cards.
You actually send Christmas cards?
I'm not a good Christmas card sender in general, but I'm doing this for my parish this year. And nice. I came up with the idea in late November, and I was kind of thinking about it. I kind of put it past parish council. Like, we didn't really budget for this, but I think it'd be a good idea. And then we shut down for Christmas. So I was like, now I'm really happy I'm doing this. So, yeah, but and actually I was like kind of afraid. I was like, man, my wrist is going to hurt after all this, but it's actually not too bad. I'm about halfway done. So yeah, 750 Christmas cards, one going out to every household in the parish. Of course, it is also a good experiment too, because we're going to get the return mail, which tells us this person isn't in the parish anymore. So it also kind of doubles as a database cleaner.
So question.
Yeah.
Do you like your signature?
It's fine. I would love to be able to do something really fancy. However, I'm a lefty, and so I will just take whatever I have because I'm going to smudge whatever I have.
I absolutely despise my own signature and my own handwriting. It's the most difficult thing whenever I sign checks or journal is that I hate my own handwriting.
You handwrite? Like, you actually use cursive?
Yeah, I use cursive.
Oh, wow.
Did I not tell this story?
Are you 75 years old?
No, here's the thing. So
no offense to anyone who's 75 years old. I'm just...
Yeah. No. So in seminary, at one point in time, we had to write... it was a request to become... for candidacy.
You have to write all your...
Dear Bishop.
Yeah.
What's that?
You have to write all your requests to the bishop.
Yeah. So it's like, Dear Bishop, I would like to be a candidate for being a priest. Could you make that happen for me, please? And the seminary was like, you have to handwrite this. And oh boy, was that an embarrassing process for all of us who grew up typing things and never did any of that
I only had
to stuff.
I printed mine, like hand printed.
Yeah, but even that, it looks kind of like
no, that's a lot. Listen, cursive has kind of gone the way of the past for whatever reason.
Well, anyway, I remembered that. I mean, I realized that my handwriting is very bad. So I actually bought a book on handwriting. And then for like about a year, I practiced my handwriting and was taking notes in classes with my handwriting. So now it's legible. It's not terrible as it was before, but still, I don't care for it. So yes, I do write cursive in my journaling.
Gotcha. I'm a printer. I write a lot for notes and stuff like that. I have a little journal I've been using for studying. So whenever I'm reading an article or a book, I just put notes in this booklet, in this like little journal, but it's always printed because,
all right.
And I don't know. It's fine. It's faster for me. I could do cursive, I guess, but listen, my cursive is always going to be bad. Well, and okay, I don't know if I've ever shared this story. So in grade 1 or 2, when we were starting to learn cursive writing or whatever, or printing and stuff and letters of the alphabet, when I was in school, so I'm a lefty.
Yes.
And so binders are not very helpful if you're left-handed, right? But my brain worked in such a way that I would write right to left, but the printing would be left to right. So it would read as if I was just writing normally, but I was doing it backwards. Apparently, this is what I did as a kid.
That's crazy. Wait, so you write your letters, you write your sentences backwards?
Yeah, I was writing everything backwards, but it would read left to right.
So,
but because it wasn't done like everyone else, the teachers kind of like just killed it in me, and I don't remember ever doing that now. Really, my parents tell me this story all the time.
So if you're writing Harrison, you would spell it Nosirrah.
Yeah, except it would read left to right still.
Right. You would just...
Yeah.
That is fascinating. I've always
apparently,
known you've had a weird brain, but that really
yeah.
confirms it.
Well, and for me, that's always the story that tells me my brain is just always going to be weird and different because, but for me, it was the intuitive solution of, well, okay, I can't, if I do it this way, I'm going to smudge my writing. I'm not going to be able to write properly because
Right.
of the rings in the binder. So this is the way that obviously makes sense. But it was also it's also a bit of an indictment against sometimes systems education that says we can't be flexible for different ways of doing things. But it is what it is. And you live and learn. But that was yeah. So because of that, I think I always got a bit behind in writing, and now my writing's just horrible, and I just accept that.
Well, speaking of horrible writing, let's read some horribly written tweets in the Summa Tweetologica. Oop, hold on a second. I realize I am not plugged into the internet. I'm using my Wi-Fi. It's terrible. I'm going to plug it in real quick. This will be great for those who are watching the YouTubes.
So great for the YouTubes.
Let's see if...
I was wondering why you kept on kind of cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, I realized I wasn't plugged in. Let's see. Give it a second here. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. There we go. Okie dokie.
All right.
The Summa Theologica was St. Thomas Aquinas' summary of theology. The Summa Tweetologica is a summary of things that we found interesting on Twitter. First tweet that I would like to talk about is from Agnes Crawford. And this person tweets, in case you're wondering how things are going, the blood of Saint Januarius has liquefied in Naples. In the 20th century, this happened 3 times. 1939, 1944, before the eruption of Vesuvius, and 1980, before the devastating earthquake at Benevento. So for those who don't know, this weird little thing about Catholic land is that the blood of Saint Januarius is in a little vial, and most of the times it's dusty, because that's what happens to blood. After hundreds of years, it gets dusty. But on his feast day, the bishop goes in there to see if his blood has become juicy. If the dusty blood becomes juicy blood, things are okay. We're going to have ourselves a great old year. If it doesn't become juicy, something bad is going to happen. At least that's the lower T tradition, which is always, I don't know about you, but I feel like...
Yeah.
What?
Sorry. No, I'll let you finish first.
Okay, yeah. For me, it feels like this happens like every 6 months, but it must happen once a year. But I feel like it's happening like all the time. Or maybe just because my idea of time is all wonky, but it's delightfully weird. I don't worry too much about it, but it makes sense, when everyone thinks that 2021 is gonna be great. Saint Januarius is like, no, it's not.
Right. So my when things like this go out and there is claims of fantastical things, I always think, let's do some investigating. And so because I saw the tweet, we shared the tweet earlier, I was like, oh, this isn't great. But I was like, I wonder if there's more to the story or anything. And then actually, so I did some researching, and according to CNA, actually, quoting Vatican journalist Francesco Antonio Grana, that the liquefaction almost never happens on December 16th. And in the last 34 years, the number of times it has happened can be counted on one hand.
Wait, okay, so how many times do they check it?
3 times a year. There are 3 feasts a year.
It's not once a year. I'm not completely.
Yeah, no. So this is not his feast day. His feast days in September or May, one of those two.
That makes more sense.
But we can also breathe a sigh of relief and think, okay, just because it didn't liquefy today doesn't mean anything bad's going to happen. You see, this is the problem sometimes when things just get said on social media. We just presume it's true and then freak out. But apparently, this is actually quite normal for his blood not to liquefy. So we're okay. It is, but it's worth using that as an opportunity to talk about like weird Catholic relics and devotions, because it's weird. It's really weird. Like for blood to liquefy on 3 separate occasions a year just seems like a very odd thing for God to use to show his presence in the world.
I mean, on one hand, it does, but on the other, not to put myself into the mind of God, but it seems like a really fun way to do it. Why do something? Why send a letter? Why send the world an email? Why not do something completely and utterly weird? That's way more fun.
it's totally more fun, and I think that's the way you have to look at it. It's God's playfulness, right?
Yes.
Like I always use the image. I always like to talking about how Jesus says, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain or to this mulberry bush, go into the sea or whatever like that,
Yeah.
or this mountain, go over there. And I'm thinking to myself, only a child would see things that way. Like that's the playfulness of God. That this totally, this totally like impossible thing would be the most fantastical way to show playfulness. And so, I think
Yeah.
that's the way you have to look at it, right? It's this kind of playful lens, this kind of sense of like, because there's a reason Jesus says we have to have a heart of a child, because when you have the heart of a child, then there is a playfulness with God's creation, and that God even has this playfulness with Him, right? There's that famous kind of talk about the Trinity is perichoresis. It's a dance, but it's like also play, right? There is a truth to that, and it's something we lose in our humanity. And so I think even with miracles, it seems, if it seems weird, then maybe we're too grown up.
Yes, I agree with that. But also, I'm thinking, God often kind of delegates through the saints. This is why he allows Saint Anthony to find your wallet all the time. It's God's
Right.
grace moving, but he likes to, the saints, they do stuff in heaven. And so
Yeah.
you've got to wonder, and this is purely by analogy, but like God and Saint Januarius have to have a conversation like 3 times a year. And
Yeah.
God's like, and Januarius is like, can I juicify my blood today or no? What's the deal? What are we going to do today? And I just find that delightful.
It is. It is delightful. It is. But at the same time, I think we should just console people to know that it's not common for his blood to liquefy today. And so it doesn't foretell the end of the world or some calamity coming.
No.
It's just because I think that's the thing too, right? We got to be careful. Like we should see things in a playful way, not in a magical way. So playfulness allows to see this kind of happenstance of things and to, as I was talking about earlier, but magic is about power over things, right? And so that's as a way we often see God's grace is we see it as terms of magic and power over things. And so it can manipulate according to its will. That's not the way miracles should work. They're working in a playful way, not in a magical way. But we have this tendency to fall into that magical thinking, even as Catholics, the way we approach a lot of things. So if we're not approaching it with playfulness, then maybe we need to kind of work on our heart and grow in childlikeness a bit.
Yeah, and I think we also have to have an understanding of the wider scope of history and where we're going, and the eschaton and the end of time and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's there's going to be a lot of good stuff and bad stuff that happens before the end of time. So there's
That's
really
right.
no reason to like super freak out about things
Mm-hmm.
either way, because in the end we know where the story's going. So,
Well,
and
exactly.
also if you're like, you know what, I don't really care or buy into the Januarius blood juicification thing, that's okay. You can still be a good Catholic.
It's still not a miracle actually technically recognized by the church anyways.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not, the people like popes have gone there and stuff, but it's
Right.
not like officially, it's
Hmm.
not, it doesn't have like the official stamp or whatever.
Cool.
So there you go. So,
Yeah.
just chill, have some fun with it because that's the way God is.
Yes.
All right. I want to go. You actually have, uh, hmm, yeah, from Father Josh at TweetMob. Still thinking about the part where Bo-Katan unveils and reveals that Mando was raised in the SSPX. So have you been watching The Mandalorian?
I have. I just caught up. So spoiler
Okay, good.
warning for all those who
Okay,
haven't
yes,
been
yes,
watching.
yes. So for those who haven't been watching or who are waiting for whatever, if you haven't seen the episode, yeah, just spoilers. Spoilers. Okay. I've been watching The Mandalorian too, and this season has been even better than the first. Um, it's okay. I'm gonna before I go into Father Josh's tweet here.
Okay.
It's been exciting on a multiple levels. First, I think it's just a revolutionary show. It's changed how we can approach television now because now it's made a movie property into a fantastic, substantial, well-written, well-produced television show. up until now, most comic book television shows or anything like that have been very cheaply made. The storytelling has been subpar. The acting has been meh. And I'll get even in Mandalorian. Sometimes the acting, that's the only thing. Like sometimes although the second season has been way better, but the first season the acting was a little on the cheap. But generally, I'm like, and I think it shows with their recent unveiling of all the new shows they're going to be doing that this has been not only a success, this has been a revolution. And it's exciting to see now that they can expand the Star Wars universe in ways that it goes beyond just having a movie, right? And that you can, and they've done it so well. It's not in this, let's just throw in these new characters who come out of nowhere, but it's like slow introductions, right? So like someone like Ahsoka Tano, which like when she showed up, I was just like, oh, so excited. But she was a new character that showed up in Clone Wars, but she kind of slowly developed and she took on a more central role as the show developed. And then same thing with Rebels, she took on a very central role there too. So they're doing this kind of slow integration, and it's connected to the universe, but it's also got its own storyline. It's kept the aesthetic of Star Wars. All these things. I'm so excited to see what they're going to do in the future. And I'm so excited that it's Favreau and Filoni who are at the helm really of the creativity. Do you have any comments on that before we actually talk about Father Josh's tweet?
I haven't watched Rebels, or what's the other one?
Clone Wars.
You cut out for a second. You're back.
Yeah,
Cool.
you cut out for 2.
That was weird.
Okay. Yeah. I just said that the other one was Clone Wars. That's the last thing I said.
Yeah, but even there's like a bunch of fun stuff. If your only experience of it is the movies, then there's still like stuff there for you as well. So I think it does a nice job of balancing. It's telling its own story, and some people critique it for fan service, but it's like no, it just cares about the universe and the characters, and it treats them well. I don't think that's fan service. I think that's like using the stuff that you have. I think that's good.
Right, but you also like that's part of entertainment is you should do fan service. Like,
yeah, I mean,
if you want this,
especially with stuff like that.
I think that's why a lot of people had frustrations with The Last Jedi. It really tried to subvert the whole idea of fan service. It just kind of upended all of that. And there's nothing wrong with it, but they don't do it in a pandering way. It's not like, oh, and Anakin built C-3PO. I'm like, what? Right? No,
the connections make sense.
The connections make sense, and I think that's just amazing, right? And so it's been like every Friday, I get very excited for Fridays, and I'm really excited for
the first few episodes for me, it felt a little bit like watching a video game. Like the first couple episodes were like, oh, you have to go here, and in order to complete this quest, you have to do this quest for somebody else, and this happens and that happens. So there's a little bit of that, but still entertaining. A good way to waste some time. But the last like 2 episodes have been like, wow, I've been like very much enjoying it. So it's a good time waster. Okay, so what's this deal about the SSPX and Mandalorians and what the heck?
All right, so this is the episode where Bo-Katan shows up. So she is a Mandalorian as well. Katie Sackhoff does the voice of her actually in Clone Wars and Rebels. And so she actually plays her in the show too, which I thought was a neat little connection.
Fun. I didn't know
yeah, that was really fun. And so what we find out is that Mando is essentially in a cult or in a sect of Mandalorians, right? Because the thing is, you can never take off your helmet ever. There's never allowed. You're just never ever allowed. He's under the impression that this is the Mandalorian way. This is the way, right? And so when Bo-Katan, and I was always confused by that because I'm like, I've seen Rebels, I've seen Clone Wars. Mandalorians are always taking their helmet off. So I was like, that seems like like, how did they miss that? So when she showed up and they kind of used that as an opportunity to explain things, it helped me understand that more. But yeah, it's essentially, so he's in a traditionalist sect of Mandalorians who see a strong importance in aesthetics and form and strict adherence to a code of law without any possibility for budging. And that is, and so what Father Josh calls it the SSPX. This was a comment a few people made, and I kind of said, "Oh, yeah, there's something there maybe. It's because but it's interesting, like, and that's part of the struggle of the whole show is him coming maybe, and I think that's going to be something we're going to explore more in season 3. Is his relationship with this kind of extremist version of Mandalorians?
Yeah, and it's the way they do it is awesome because they take off their helmets,
Yeah,
and he looks at them and he's like, "What are you doing?" And then one of the
yeah,
other Mandalorians says, "Oh, he's one of those." And it's like, yeah. So I made a connection as well, and also like stuff like that, using what seems like gaps in the narrative and actually
hmm
like tying them together very nicely in a way that makes sense and brings a greater depth to the story and the world
hmm
building. Like stuff like that's really great, and so they've been really good about that. Like,
and do it. The other cool thing was that with that too was it was they said, "Oh, he's one of those," but it was like in a non-judgmental way though too, right? Like they work together.
they do
They
work
have a
together,
common
yeah.
mission, right? It shows you too that okay, this person might even be a bit of an extremist, but they're not the enemy,
Hmm.
and so maybe there's
They're
some
just
bridge building.
sometimes slightly annoying about the helmet thing.
Right. And I mean, listen, they do kind of clash, but they also kind of find some commonality in their mission together, right? So it was, and I'm sure Bo Katan's going to show up some more in the show as well. So, because yeah, the more I reflect on it, and I just think this has been, and this is the other cool thing in the end too, generally now. I'm going back to general after the
Yeah.
SSPX thing. It's the first time in a very long time that we've had a television show that's a cultural event.
Yes.
This is something everyone's talking about. This is something everybody looks forward to on Fridays, right? This is something that everyone is kind of tapped into. That hasn't happened in forever. I mean, yeah, there are shows like Stranger Things and stuff like that, but those aren't things that can cross generations. It's the sign of a good intellectual property that it can be something that children can enjoy, teens can enjoy, young adults can enjoy, adults can enjoy. All these generations can enjoy it together, and they're all involved in it. And that's something good. Like that's actually something really good. We need
Yeah.
cultural things that draw us together again as a people because we can get so divisive today. So it's been really neat just to see that as an experience, and it's been really lovely because back in the day when there was only just your cable TV shows, that happened because that's all you had. Now there's
Right.
like an infinity amount of streaming services. There's shows that appeal to 1 or 2 million people, and that's it. This is something that's crossing that, and so it shows you like Disney was right to go into streaming, and they're gonna be hard to stop. They got to their goal for 2024 for subscribers by this year. They wanted to
Oh,
get 84 million subscribers by 2024. They're already there. So
interesting.
it's fascinating on a multiple. Well, sorry, I
I'll
could
just
talk
say
about
one
this
more
all day.
thing.
Yeah.
If you're one of these people who watches it like Friday morning at 12 a.m. or like you watch it like 6 or 7 a.m. or whatever, I'm not like a big oh no spoilers thing because I still watch stuff even if I know what's going on. I don't care. But stop tweeting
Yeah.
about it. Could you just wait a couple hours for the people who care about it? That's just rude. Like if you're watching The Mandalorian at like 5 a.m. or like 2 a.m., like come on. Like I'm not like I said, I'm not even a big spoilers guy, but that just seems a little much. Keep it to yourself. Tweet about something
Especially
else.
especially for this Friday's episode because it's the last one of the season.
Oh, is it? Okay, that makes sense because it's coming to the climax. Good.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. That's it.
Time for presbyteral exhortations. This is good because you said a few things about culture and things, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. I kind
Okay.
of want to talk about what the heck is going on.
Okay.
This is something
Let-
that has been bubbling in my brain for the last 2 years at least, and more so now. And I'm hoping to come to some conclusions that make some kind of sense. But I think everyone would agree that we're in a weird cultural moment in the West, and especially, particularly in the United States.
right.
And there are some forces in our culture that have made sense to me for a long time,
hmm
like the materialist, atheist, left wing kind of movement, progressive movement in our culture. That makes sense to me. I don't like it.
hmm
I think it's bad. I think it's real
Right.
bad. But it makes sense. What happens to a culture when you abandon God? You revive the idea of that progress will always be good, that technology will always be a force for good, that once you cast off the shackles of religion, like this is an old idea going back to Renaissance times, and we're just seeing it kind of grow. And it hit some hiccups, some bumps in the road with the
Mhm.
whole two world wars thing, but because we have such a um, lack of historical understanding, I think it's been revived in some ways. Okay,
Right.
so that makes
and we
sense to me.
and we have no sense of tradition, right? So when
Yes,
you have no sense of tradition, you can't really be rooted as a people.
right. And it's something that should be fought against and is, I think, a force of evil. It's contributing to the culture of death, all that. So it's something that like I have grown up in and understood, I think, on some level for a long time.
Hmm.
But I feel like there's a slightly different movement that is maybe more troubling to me because it's newer in a sense. I think a lot of the forces are probably older, but just this manifestation is newer, and it's all these things with like a normalization of conspiracy thinking.
Hmm.
I think it was really manifested in that whole Jericho rally
Hmm.
for Trump, and I've read some things about what happened and the things that were said there. This religious fervor into our
Hmm.
politics that is draining everyone's energy.
Hmm.
Um, the like you mentioned, the divisiveness in our culture and what's going
Hmm.
on with that, the increased polarization. I'm like, okay, what is going on? And it bothers me particularly because it's seeping into like this sort of thing, this sort of energy happening in evangelical circles. That's been going on for a while.
Hmm.
Not surprising. But what's more and more distressing is that seeping more and more into Catholic circles.
Hmm.
And it's becoming more and more ordinary in the church and
Hmm.
even high-ranking members of the church. You're like, okay,
Hmm.
what is going on with this new kind of thing? I think part of it has to do with what we talked about, a Catholic atheism.
Hmm.
That while intellectually many Catholics will say they believe in God,
Hmm.
functionally speaking, as far as living out their life, making decisions about it, we act as if God does not exist.
Hmm.
That we live in a purely materialistic world. That the church is purely a physical and social structure devoid of grace and providence,
Hmm.
that it is a structure that we have to fix through our own powers. And you see that on both sides, both left and right. You see the effects of it. You see it
Hmm.
very much so with the abuse crisis and scandal, that the church tends to treat every sort of problem like a PR problem instead of a deep spiritual problem. That we worry about, what is the policy here instead of what would a good father do. Like you see it in that, but I think you see it in this other aspect of what as well. And I do think it comes to the fact that it's not just a sort of atheism. I think it's a using of God,
Hmm.
where God becomes a means to an end.
Hmm.
That, and this is the weird thing, because you had a few Catholics speaking at this rally, you had evangelicals speaking at this rally, and what united them was not Christianity, but a political agenda. That God was very much so being used.
Hmm.
So the I'm reading a little bit of Christopher Dawson, which I want to get more into his thought. He's a very Augustinian historical thinker,
Hmm.
and he basically believes that the key to history, to understanding history, is to understanding religion. And I think this is very important because in a lot of historical thinking, there's this kind of wiping away or pushing to the side religious reasons for doing things.
Hmm.
So wars aren't done for religious reasons. They're done for political, economic, power reasons. And then the leaders will slap on a religious thing to get the populace stirred up and get them on their side. Now, there's
Hmm.
an aspect of truth to this, right? Because there's definitely materialistic motives for policy and wars and such throughout the ages. But if you go too far with that, you forget that human beings have been deeply religious until the last few hundred years,
Hmm.
that we ignore the religious motives in a culture. And even the idea of society, we construct it as a contract that we work better as individuals if we decide not to kill each other and to have some sort of structure and
Hmm.
government and society. But historically speaking, that's not really how people's work. How people really work is we're in the same area, we believe in these same gods, and that influences our thinking and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And very much so throughout history, gods were very much localized, even to the point of if you're going to attack a foreign nation in the ancient world, one of the things you could do to really destroy them was to take away a statue of their god. Not exactly that the statue was God, but kind of the source of the god's power. So if you steal their statue of their god, it's kind of like stealing all of their churches and their Statue of Liberty and them being kind of abandoned. This was like deeply held beliefs in the ancient world. Does that all make sense so far?
Yep.
What you have with, I think, beginning with the Protestant Reformation, wars of religion, um, in that era, you have the death of the cultural bindings in Europe. Not that Europe has always been peaceful. Not that Christendom was
Right.
always this super like we all love Jesus together. There's still wars.
Hmm.
There's still a lot of bad things that happen, right? But there
Right.
is
But
this kind of
it lost its cohesive whole.
it lost its cohesive whole. Okay,
Yeah.
and so if in a deeper sense, if a culture loses its cult, it's going to disintegrate. But what you have in the last few hundred years is kind of like, okay, you've lost the energy of the culture, but it's kind of like you're running towards a finish line and you jump. So you're gonna kind of go extra far, but you're gonna fall flat on your face. So you have the liberalism, freedom, the idea that nations can kind of work together, that there's still like these fumes of Christianity within the West, even things like caring for the poor, or I mean, even things as crazy, I would say, as like extreme. Look at an organization like PETA. I don't think you have that without Christianity. It's a twisting of the idea of helping those who are lesser, and there's a religious like kind of fervor in that. All these kind of like Christian energies that have dissipated once you lose the center, once you lose the power, it just kind of goes out.
Right.
And I think even to an extent, the founding of the U.S. is founded on the fumes of Christianity.
Okay.
So you do, in one sense, have a religious people who have moved to North America, and it's still a part of the culture. All the founding fathers would have been familiar with the Bible and that sort of thing, but it's not a true Christianity. It's a kind of deism, and that for a while sustains morals, and we even know that like not incredibly well. You still have slavery, you still have all these other problems, right?
Hmm.
But now we're at a point where that energy source, that leap towards the future, I think now we're in the middle of a face plant.
Hmm.
Movements of cultures throughout history, there are movements and changes, right? So you've got, and I'm speaking very broad strokes from a very amateur perspective on history, uh, but let's say you've got Islam kind of integrating itself in the East.
Hmm.
There's an integration of the pagan culture, the Islamic culture, and you get something kind of new. There's a replacement, a movement. Okay,
Hmm.
or just Christianity. So you have Christianity moving toward the West, taking in different ideas and using it and integrating it and that sort of thing. Or Christianity moving to the East or to Africa. There's this kind of not quite a synthesis, but incorporation of that culture. There's something that is a movement, all right. But now that we've lost the cultural generator of cults, there's nothing to replace what's going on. So we're kind of in a void. So this is where I think you get postmodernism, but postmodernism isn't the only thing going on here. Because human beings are a religious creature, there's still that desire for some kind of religion. The spiritual energy has to go somewhere. So for some people, it's going to this idea of progressivism, the perfectibility of human beings. Um, but for some, it's a desire to make a new cult. And so I see in the right in the U.S., you're building a new mythology. You're building new heroes. You're building new gods. You're building new prophecy. And that's what I kind of see with QAnon,
Mhm.
with the elevation of political leaders. Um, it's we can't go back to a pure kind of pagan barbarism anymore. It's going to be something new and something different, because even throughout the pagan cultures, okay, maybe there's a changing of the gods, or like Rome kind of adopts Hellenistic gods. There's still a continuity in that. But for us, we don't have continuity. So you've got this human energy, movement, and desire. There's still maybe a few lingering fumes of Christianity in the culture, but there's no energy kind of behind it. And so I think you see a new building of a new kind of cult. Has anything I said made sense?
Sort of. I'm just is very large brushstrokes.
Yeah, very much
Right.
so. There's going to be a lot of exceptions to everything I've said, but I'm
Right.
thinking big picture kind of movements. Where are we
The thing
as
is,
a
this
culture?
isn't even, but this isn't also new. This has
Okay.
happened before in France, for example, in the early
Hmm.
20th century, where many Catholics associated themselves with l'Action Française, which was a political movement, an extreme right political movement, attempting to, where the founder essentially was an agnostic at best, probably an atheist, who used the church to, he said, listen, no, the church has to be kind of essentially governing the state again. And he kind of got a lot of Catholics behind him and wanting to bring back the older forms of rule in France around kings and stuff like this. And he used the church for his own political ends, and Catholics bought into it tooth and nail. They just, it was very strongly supported for about 10, 15 years until Pius XI hit the smackdown on them and put the interdict down and said anybody who participates in l'Action Française is automatically excommunicated, is not in good standing with the church, and has to go to confession and stuff like that to be reinstituted to sacraments. So this isn't new. This is why, like, for me, it's there's a truth about the fumes, but I don't think there's been a void, because there's never been. I don't. I guess where I'm kind of um, struggling over is the idea of a void. I don't think there's been a void, because there's always something to. There's always going to be a religious expression. What we've not given serious thought to, and perhaps this is strongly said for someone from Canada, is that the way America went about her own founding is itself a religious action. There is a reason um, Christian fundamentalism is strong largely in America. There is a reason why American evangelicalism is essentially um, American religion with the veneer of Christianity. Because what we haven't really given thought to is the fact that there isn't really a void, but rather that America wanted to be the cult.
See, okay, I don't disagree with that. Maybe my point, or maybe one of my points, is that the spiritual energy or the idea of that founding doesn't have within itself sustainability.
No, no, I agree with you there. I mean,
Right,
because it's not from God. Anything not from God is ultimately unsustainable, right?
right.
Because when you create your own spiritual framework, it will break and will fumble. And it's not even trying to say there's something intentional there, right? I'm not saying
No,
like
of
the
course not.
founding fathers were intentionally trying to found. It's much deeper and often unconscious than that. I'm not. It's just I'm just saying that we haven't confronted the idea that the way like we haven't confronted the heresy of Americanism, which is really a whole other episode. So I no, but I agree with you. Like it can't last. It can't last because anything. It's the Tower of Babel over and over again, right? Where you're trying to reach up to heaven by your own power.
Yeah, and like you mentioned that French movement, and we see kind of imitations of that. I think with on some corners of Catholic internet and some thought
Mm-hmm.
circles about integralism and that sort of thing. And you also see a lot of young people attracted to Catholicism for the ascetics or for this idea of culture or even an idea of whiteness. You have all that, but you see that um, maybe this is a tangent, maybe this is related, but the way the culture was both changed and sustained after the fall of Rome was through the monasteries. Once again, speaking broadly, right? But the reason why the monasteries were able to keep the good of the pagan culture and evangelize the area and convert nations, sometimes very imperfectly, uh,
Mm-hmm.
is because their priorities were God first.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else came secondary. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you form this community, and the idea of that community and that monastery isn't necessarily to we need to turn this swampland into a garden, or we need to make this land fertile for crops and vineyards and this sort of thing. The idea was not to save the culture or perfect the culture. The idea was like God comes first, and everything else flows from that.
Mm-hmm.
What you have with some of the spiritual movements in the U.S. right now is we want to fix the culture, so we'll use God to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
God becomes a means
Right.
because God doesn't actually have grace isn't actually a thing, I think, in these movements.
Right.
And on top of that, it's not just that grace doesn't have power in these movements, it's that there's no genuine Christian understanding of history.
Right.
That ultimately this is all a story that God is telling. That we see, and this happens very much so even in parishes, that we see ourselves as the centers of history, as individuals. And a lot of times, like, this isn't even people being malicious or anything. They just see all the genuine wrong that is happening in the world, all the genuine wrong that's happening in the church, and they think to themselves, how can I fix this?
Mm-hmm.
And that comes not from necessarily a bad place. But I also believe that comes from an ultimate lack of trust in the providence of God.
Mm-hmm.
That God ultimately is the one writing history. And like I said, it's not like that we are these utter silent pacifists who do nothing. But this is a very hard thing to detect in our own hearts
Mm-hmm.
because this is one of the very sneaky movements of pride
Mm-hmm.
that the enemy tempts us to do good things, but in the wrong way. But like I said, I think this is a kind of we're using God for what we see as higher purposes, and some of the higher purposes are the culture. Some of the higher purposes are the state, because we've
Or
grown.
particular ideologies. Yeah, I want because I
Yeah.
wanted to just throw in one little caveat because I think some listeners are going to hear this and just think, okay, well, what about the left? The same thing. This
Yeah.
is the thing that this holds just as much true on both sides. This is not just a critique of the right; it's also a critique of the left, where an ideology. Catholics cannot be ideological because we're not about an idea; we're about a person.
Yeah.
Okay, ideologies, and this is the problem. This is a whole other thing. I was a little behind the curtain. Father Anthony have been texting because I'm like, I want to do an episode or maybe a two-parter on how to think as a Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to be broader than this because I think it's important. But to think as a Catholic, as a little kind of hint into this, is the idea that if you see ideologies, which is how we are formed to think today, okay, and that has a bunch of roots, okay, it has roots in a lot of philosophical tradition, especially with Hegel, essentially. So the idea is you have this system or this ideal as to what you think the world should look like, and then you try to fit the world into that box, and you're going to do whatever it takes politically, religiously, socially, whatever, to make that happen. The problem is ideology. It goes against the fact of createdness. It goes against the fact of God. It goes after the fact of our concrete existence. It goes against what we in philosophy call like epistemology, how we know things. It goes against a lot of things. Like I said, this is a bigger topic than I can do right now. But what Father Anthony is kind of getting at here is really is that we are essentially breathing the air of ideology and thinking that I can fit Catholicism into that somehow. Yeah, but that's not how the church works, and that's not how a Catholic is supposed to think. And it's very dangerous. And I share your concern because you see it a lot online on both sides.
Yeah.
On both sides, okay? And to be a Catholic means you have to think and look at the world differently. You have to look at the world through the lens of faith, right? Which is a participation in the vision of Jesus. And if that is, which means then you have to be reflective. You can't just be reactive. If you see something you don't like and you just go back out after it, that's not Catholic. I'm sorry. And that might offend someone who listens, and I'm sorry. But because here's the thing. I do it too sometimes. So I'm not like, but I recognize it, I repent of it, and I try to move forward. I'm trying to become more reflective. I'm not trying to react right away. Because I have to ask myself, is there anything good here first? Because sometimes there are goods, like, there are some really important things to talk about in regards to racism and stuff around gender. Like, those are important things, but they come from the lens and the heart of the church, not the church has to align with my politics. If the church aligns with your politics, you stop being Catholic. Mm-hmm. And you've become a political entity. And so I think this is what you're kind of getting at, because like the problem becomes then when you put your cards in all your eggs in that basket's going to be dropped and break one day, and it's going to be all gone. We have to do it from the heart of the church.
Yeah. And so I think there is a solution or something that people can do concretely. And I think that is the renewal of the parish. Mm-hmm. If culture comes from cult, I think the one difficulty and the reason why you have so much anger is because there's been kind of a dimming of the bulb of Catholicism. Mm-hmm. You've got weak leaders in the church. You have weak liturgy in the church. And our initial reaction is we need to fix this top down. We need to have the right bishops. We need to have the right politicians. But that's never how culture... I mean, it has an influence on the culture, sure. But we're trying to fix the branches and not the roots. And I think the roots are in parish life. There's so often an attempt to... Whenever we're trying to reform parishes, we're trying to make parishes successful or to look like this or to look like that. Instead of just kind of cleaning the dust off the bulb of the parish. I think that's what needs to happen. And I've been very against a oversimplistic save the liturgy, save the world. But I think there is some kind of truth to that. Mm-hmm. I think if the Mass is the source and summit of our faith, if this is the primary means by which we encounter God, or the strongest means by which we encounter God in the sacrifice, in the reception of the Eucharist, that culture begins on that level. It also
Hmm.
begins on the level of, and this is something that I'm seeing a lot of, and it's so funny because a lot of families think they're doing this poorly. But I'm seeing a lot of young Catholic families do an amazing job of raising their kids Catholic.
Hmm.
And they feel like they're stumbling a bit because they don't have a lot of models, either from their own life or lives around them. But I see it happening in these little pockets. And, or individuals, bringing people together, bringing them into their homes when we can. Uh, ugh, ugh. Um, but like that's how change actually happens. But the only reason but we have to make sure that we're not doing this for the purpose of quote unquote the culture, or for the purpose of quote unquote saving the nation or making it great, or it has to be for the sake of God, and then everything else flows from it. It's a stance of humility that I think we've lost because we
Hmm.
think that one, we're the center, and two, we're the only powers at work in this world.
Right. And it doesn't help that this is something I've been reflecting a lot on lately. It doesn't help that we have access to information about everything that's going on everywhere all the time.
Mhm.
So that often feeds things, and it takes our attention away from what we can actually control. Right. Like some people like complain about some of the stuff that's sometimes going on in Rome, and I'm like, what can I do? Honestly, literally, what could I do? Nothing. But I can do something in my parish. So why are you wasting your time? The people who can do something, that's for them to worry about and trust them to do something, right? Um, and I'm not saying you can't actually always put attention on higher level things. I'm not trying to say anything about it. I'm talking about Rome in general, because there's always stuff going on, right? It's just but um um that should take up like 2% of our brain space at best. At best. Because you can't really do much. But um, you can throw your imagine if all the energy we spend every week going online, reading about what's going on in the church and the world and all our politics, 3, 5, 10 hours a week, whatever someone might put into it, and we threw that energy into our parish. That would change a lot.
Yeah.
It would change a lot.
I think we are very much so living too much in the moment.
Yeah.
That we need to become better as Catholics at having a broader and deeper understanding of history, of seeing God as the one who is authoring it ultimately, of understanding our tiny place in the universe as both important because we're God's creation and He's put us here for a purpose and He'll work that purpose, but also realizing we're only one piece of the mosaic.
Hmm.
And we also don't make sense as one piece of the mosaic. You have to be
Hmm.
part of the entire picture for things to come into clearer view. And I think this is why there's so much impetucy in so many of these movements. It's just this yelling into the void, because we have a misunderstanding of what the church and what history really is. Um, I think we can do a better job of that. And
Hmm.
you have to wade through a lot of stuff. You have to wade through. There's a lot of writing about history that is very much through the lens
Hmm.
of the problems that we've discussed too, right? So finding good Catholic history is important as well. But there's something about this cult and culture and history, and like I said, yeah, you can see a lot of it's the problems we're facing now aren't completely new,
Right.
uh, but I think there's something different happening.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't disagree with you there. I guess I'm bringing up stuff like France as
Right, right, right.
because actually we have the intellectual tools, Maurice Blondel, to um, to deal with these things. Um, but it's interesting to me. Maybe I'll just quickly end with this because
Yeah.
um, for years I actually really was worried about the rise of integralism, which I know you don't care to know about. But um, I was actually legitimately concerned about it, just from stuff I had seen on Twitter or whatever. And it kind of took on a life of its own outside of Twitter, even a little bit. It's really not. It's not a worry of mine anymore. So this is where you're right. It is different too, but we do still have the tools of the past because in a way, I want to call it like a neo-integralism or a new integralism, because integralism itself essentially wants to see the church govern the state, essentially. The church should be, since it's the perfect society, it is there. They'll argue it is therefore the only place that has the perfect form of governance. And I'm like, have you been to a chancery? Or have you seen how we run our parishes? Right. So there's that, but it's what I call a neo-integralism, which, and this is where it's dangerous. I'm not going to say the person's name, but it really disturbed me when I heard this phrase, because this is at the heart of a group of intellectuals in the church and a group of thinkers in the church in America, at least, that I've noticed. And this person used this phrase that we are to achieve Aristotelian ends, so ends towards the good and virtue and everything, through Machiavellian means. Right. When I heard that phrase, I freaked out, and that is what I'd call a new integralism, which sees power. And this is the other thing, like integral, because it's the other problem with integralism. It sees power in a modern sense, not from a theological sense. But it sees power as something to be twisted and manipulated in order to achieve a good end. And so it can impose things, etc. And it has a faulty sense of freedom. And so I'm starting to realize that my fear around integralism was kind of justified, but there's something new out there in how we're going about our politics, because there are more and more people in the church who are going to two different extremes in how they understand the faith and trying to impose it in the world. And neither of these come from the heart of the church, and it scares the heck out of me.
And it's the same error.
It's the same error.
Just like the whole Cold War was the same materialistic error, that both rampant capitalism and Marxism are the same materialist heresy, just two different coins.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we forget that. And then, I had one more thing to say as we wrap up. It was something. Oh, yeah. So, there's a romantic vision of Christendom,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also something good about Christendom.
Mm-hmm.
The thing we have to remember is that the new Christendom is going to look different. Just as medieval society preserved some of the good things of pagan society, but transformed into something new, we look to the past for good things, but a new Christian culture is going to look different.
Right.
Just
Well,
it's
yeah, and
it's
this,
going to
yeah, I was just going to say, the reason it's going to look different, again, this gets to another point. When we talk about, I'm always even hesitant to use the phrase Catholic culture in general.
Yeah.
Because, again, the beauty of Catholicism is how amenable it is to a multiplicity of cultures. But that the church is meant to be a leaven, which means she does things often in hiding and in secret that slowly change a culture that is authentically itself. But so like when we say, like, often we talk about Catholic culture, we essentially want to impose something and destroy whatever isn't Catholic, without realizing that the whole phrase Catholic means universal. So you can have Catholicism in Africa, and it could be authentically African and authentically Catholic. And you can have Catholicism in North America, and it can be authentically Western, and it can be authentically Catholic. But they can look very different, because the church is actually very malleable towards culture. We have to be careful about this idea of this imposition form of things.
The bindings that bring those two cultures together are deeper and more invisible than integralists and others think they are.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's good. Hopefully people got something out of that. And this is, like I said, this is something that's been percolating in my brain. It's going to keep doing so for a while. But there you go.
There you go.
Guys, hey, thanks for listening. Please leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends about the podcast. Tell your enemies too, because Jesus says we must love our enemies. You can find me listening to really long history podcasts.
You can find me on Twitter at FRHarrison.
Contact the podcast and receive updates at ClericalPod on Twitter. Find us on Facebook, YouTube, or email us at clericallyspeaking@gmail.com. Peace.
God bless.